All right. What's up, Wayne? Long
Hey,
time no see.
I know.
So when we first had you on the podcast, I think you were the second episode I recorded. It might not have been the second one that we got uploaded, but at that point we met each other at SRX at Stafford. And that was kind of it. We just kind of knew each other, knew of each other. And since then, we we've become pretty close. Our relationship has flourished. I mean, this past summer we spent, what was it, 2 weeks pretty much together on the road with each
Hmm.
other, on and off. SRX at Stafford. Then we stayed at hotels with each other for Pocono and New Hampshire, I
Hmm.
think both.
Hmm. Yep.
And we bonded over a lot of shared interests.
Hmm.
And that was the plan for this summer.
Hmm.
We were gonna have a similar plan. I mean, we had it figured out. We were going to I was gonna you're allowed to have a second shooter for SRX. I was gonna be your second shooter for Stafford. And then you were gonna come bunk with me at my place for pretty much that whole week. We are gonna go to the Bronx Zoo, maybe do NASCAR Pocono, and then we're gonna leave off to whatever the next SRX race was at, what was it, Thunder Road.
Thunder Road.
And a couple weeks ago, we get this bombshell announcement that SRX is not having a 2024 season, and you found out like the rest of us.
Yeah, it seemed to be a very quickly developing thing. And I'm an independent contractor, so they really didn't have to tell me anything. But yeah, I was as surprised as everyone else and bummed as most. But I mean, that's about it with that because I don't even know some of the backstory. But I mean, it was a long um, kind of a grieving process. It was like losing a family member because I had so many relationships with team members and drivers and sponsors and everybody, people in the on the track and people off the track.
Yeah, and I mean, pretty much for 3 years. I mean, you were on the road nonstop for 6 weeks in the summer. I mean, basically lived with these guys for 6 weeks out of the year for 3 seasons. I mean, that's your dream too. You're surrounded by, these people that are childhood heroes for some of us. And then, at the end of the day, some of them are just friends. And that's got to be tough. And you contacted me, which is like, you have so many cool stories to tell, and I think the world should hear it. So this is a good place for it. And I think I got to start off. I got to ask you about the one where you were telling me about yesterday. Your tour of it. What was the IMS museum? Your tour of that?
Yeah, so the first season of SRX took us to Indianapolis Raceway Park, and it was the weekend of Fourth of July, and one of the crew guys was like, "Hey, you gonna go with us to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum on Sunday?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I could do that. I've been there before, but it's kind of a cool thing." And now that's going to be totally different because they're redoing the whole museum. But back then, it was pretty much just chock full of cars, race cars that ran the 500, mostly winners and whatnot. So didn't think anything of it. So I go from my hotel room, check out a hotel room, go to the Speedway park, and get out of my car. And who's walking towards me but Ray Everingham himself. So I did not realize that Ray was going to be, frankly, our tour guide through Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And if anyone knows Ray Everingham, he is one of the most knowledgeable um, historians, I guess you would say, on racing in general. So just to be able to tour the museum with someone who is closely tied to the racetrack and the history of it, being the Jeff Gordon's crew chief during that first Brickyard. And it was very surreal in a lot of ways. But one of the ways was that Ray was actually telling our tour guide, who was one of the best tour guides they had, stuff the tour guide didn't know. And just looking at the cars and the evolution of an Indy car, and Ray pointing out, hey, look at this, look at that. This is the first time they use this. I'm not a real car guy, so I don't know the ins and outs, but it was still neat. And then at one moment, there's used to be, because I don't know how it's going to look now, but it used to be a wall full of all the winners at the track, and he had all of us stop, look at the wall, and count how many of these drivers that are on this wall race with SRX. And at that time, it was like Bobby Labonte, Tony Kanaan, Elio Castro Neves. You had Willie T. Ribbs being the first African American person to race in the 500. And that doesn't even include like some of the guys that worked, especially on that first year, worked for Penske. I had a friend who was one of the crew guys who won two Indy 500s, one with Will Power and one with Simon Pagenaud. And you had people who've worked on Cup teams and Xfinity teams have won there too. And actually, one of the guys who was with us, Bobby Krug, wound up winning or not winning. He was on the podium for a Skip Barber F4 race later that year. So it was kind of a cool full circle because he was on the tour too. He actually he's the one that took the picture of me kissing the bricks, which was even kind of cooler, and because a couple of months later, him and I were standing on the podium, celebrating I think it was second or third place finish. So, I mean, it's one of those, I call them SRX moments where you kind of you're in the moment, you're part of the moment, but you have to step back mentally a little bit and be like, wow, this is my life. This is pretty cool.
No, I like just being surrounded with the names that are on the SRX or were unfortunately on the SRX tour, like Ray Evernham, Tony Stewart. Can't believe I'm drawing a blank here. It's been a long morning, but all those names. And then, did you have a moment to step back when he starts reading off the people on the wall that are on the SRX list? Like, was that one of those moments for you where you're like third person, just like, whoa, like this is legit?
Yeah, I mean, that was a good moment like that. And also, even outside of SRX. So last year, for the podium finish, I shot the Detroit Grand Prix, and I was walking through right outside the paddock, the IndyCar paddock, and walking towards me was Bobby Labonte, and Bobby and I know him pretty well now. He knows who I am at least. And we kind of walk towards each other, and this is an IndyCar race, and he stops, and we look at each other. It's almost like that Spider-Man meme, and we point at each other. It's like, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "What are you doing here?" He was doing some stuff with the business that him, his wife, and his brother run, and catering and all that. But like those kind of things where you see somebody outside of, okay, yeah, it's Wayne. He's got the uniform on. He's got the camera. We know who he is in the suit. But seeing people outside of that and having them still recognize me and want to talk to me um, is pretty sweet. I mean, it's just a surreal kind of thing because, as you know, Sam, I'm kind of a private-ish guy, tried to blend into the background, kind of a wallflower, and just having that is pretty neat. Just to know those people, and like I said, it's not just the drivers. I mean, like Don Hawk was one of the biggest people in DEI. I think he was like the second or third person that um, Dale Earnhardt hired for DEI, and we had the first person, our chaplain Daryl Barker, was the first person that Dale Earnhardt hired for DEI, and he's also the ARCA chaplain, and he helped me through a lot of things as well. He was a very good confidant there on the road too. So I mean, even the behind the scenes people, just their resumes were just amazing, and still are amazing, but yeah, that's the thing that people don't get. They see the stuff that you see on track, but the stuff behind the scenes, those people were superstars in their own right.
Absolutely. And like I feel like they never get enough credit. So when you started, you said you made very well known to me that you almost have like an imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
especially being around SRX, and especially when you started too. You had a right connection through somebody with the All Stars, Tony Stewart's Sprint Car Series. You got right connection. You got picked to be the SRX photographer, and you're telling me you're saying about Bobby, how Bobby Labonte recognized you at the end of last summer. just like what was the evolution from you walking in? You knew all the people there. Not all of them knew you. I mean, we're talking like, Bobby Labonte, Tony Store, Castro Neves, all those guys. What was that evolution from them just being like, oh, it's a photographer to, oh, this is Wayne. We know Wayne. We trust Wayne. Wayne's a familiar face. We like Wayne. Wayne's my friend. Like, how did that happen between all these guys?
Um, I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm always just myself. So I think one of the things is I'm one of the kind of people who I like to help people. I like to take care of people, for lack of a better term. Um, and I think that they knew that they could trust me because, I kind of blend into the background. I try to stay out of people's way, but at the same time, be there when things happen and try to get the best shot possible without, being in the way, so people don't have to try to step around me or whatever. I think that's the biggest thing, and just talking to them like they're people. I know a lot of drivers are really great, personable people, but if you come at them and you want something, and they know that you want something, be it an autograph, be it a selfie, be it whatever, um, that's a different vibe than if you come at them and be like, "Hey, my name's Wayne. I'm the series photographer. Just to let you know, here's my card if you need anything." And then that's it. Not, "Hey, I've got this photo. Can you sign it? Hey, I've got this die cast. Can you sign it?" Acting professional instead of being like, fanboying everywhere and acting like a fan. I mean, and that's the thing is, I've been doing this since 2006. Not at this level, definitely not at this level, but still seeing um, the line in the sand between being a professional and being a fan, and trying to not even get close to that line. I think that helps as well. Um, but in the end, I mean, that's the thing with celebrities of any kind. If you talk to them as people, because they are people, they're going to have a better response than if you talk to them as, you know, you want something from them.
No, absolutely. And I mean, these are celebrities in our world. I mean, I don't think any series ever, that's the word I'm looking for, kind of grasp that better than SRX. Like these are the best of the best. Who is like the first driver to like, or person in the paddock that really leaned into just like, hey, you're gonna be like you're a friend. You're somebody that's here to support you, not, because I feel like photographers get a bad rep sometimes, especially on a short track level of just kind of being pesky and annoying and in the way and always, needy, but like you stand out about that. I feel like that's a terrible way to word that. But like who is the first like ally per se that you had?
Be honest with you, it's hard to pick one. So when I hit the ground, the first race at Stafford, I knew no one, like at all. Like I kind of knew Tony Stewart because I shot for the All Stars, but even in that, I always tried to stay out of his way because he's the boss, and most of the time, if he was at the track, he was racing, and that's a whole different thing. Um, but from the ground running, every all the crew guys and the ladies, were so welcoming. I mean, the first day I shot, a couple dozen, probably more like 1,000, photos of them unloading the cars and getting the paddock or the garage set up. And then later on that day, I helped them put up banners, and we put up banners for, hours and hours. I put my camera away, and I think that kind of, you know, had us bond. And just, felt like I had all of the people behind the scenes, like behind my back, had my back from day one. Um, and just developed a lot of friendships from that. And, I went through and looked through, my photos from the past 3 years, and I'll tell you what, my year one photos were not excellent. They could have found somebody a lot better uh, to do a better job. but I think they gave me a second chance with year two just because of the fact that, I was definitely a team player. Like I can't turn a wrench for save my life, but when they needed some extra, manpower to push a car around, or if it was a super hot day, I'd, carry a couple of extra bottles of water on me and give them to the crew guys that were, you know, blood, sweat, and tears underneath cars, in cars, whatever. Just that kind of thing. I think that's the thing that kind of ingratiated me with the group, and maybe that's one of the reasons why some of the drivers kind of, you know, felt comfortable around me, was they saw that I was willing to, go outside of my scope of practice, to use a medical term, um, and do whatever needs done. I might have just been hired to be, a shutter jockey, but I'm more than that as a person, and I'm not going to sit around while someone else is, sweating their what off, and I have two hands and two legs and I can go get them you know, a Gatorade or a bottle of water or something. That's the big thing, and that's the thing about SRX is it wasn't like that's not my job. It was, it was a road show, and everyone pitched in, and like even the drivers in the crash zone, especially last year with Brad Keselowski checking his own tire pressures during the segment break, or Denny Hamlin literally jumping on the hood of his car to try to get the hood to latch, and the hood pins to latch. I mean, that's the coolest thing. Or like when we were at I-55 on year two, you had like Haley Deegan and Chase, her fiance now, Chase, cleaning the front grill of her car while the other guys were working, wrenching on under the hood. I mean, that's the cool thing about the series, is it wasn't like this is my job, this is the only thing I'm going to do. Everyone was helping everybody else, and that's how you keep a series like that on the road. You're not servicing one car, two car, three car team. You've got 12 cars that go on the track plus a couple backups, and you need that. And I felt like, I could do what I could do, I did. And that just made it more of a worthwhile experience, a full experience.
No, I remember. Excuse me. I remember that at Stafford last season when Brad Keselowski was outside the car. He was working on it. Denny Hamlin was working on it, and it's like, where else would you see that? And to hear that goes on behind the scenes too with everybody, whether it's on track or off track, it has to do with competition or not, is it's refreshing in a way. Especially in a such a cutthroat industry in terms of competition, to see everybody just kind of helping each other out, putting on a good show. I mean, the only thing I can even think of that compares to that's Robbie Gordon's Stadium Super Trucks, where it's just like, we are here to put on a show for people. Because I remember 2017 IndyCar at Watkins Glen, I was there, and Robbie Gordon's Stadium Super Trucks were there too. And seeing Robbie in the breaks helping people, work on their things. But I mean, that's taken to extreme with an SRX. Uh, what's do you have any stories of like what's the most, I don't know, out of pocket thing you've seen drivers do to help progress the thing besides drive the car? Like anything else that's like, Keselowski working on the car or Hamlin working on the car?
You got to remember, Sam, I'm old. What does out of pocket mean?
Um,
I'm being serious. Does that mean like out of the box?
yeah, like the not my job thing you were talking about.
Um, I mean, there was a time that Randall LaJoy got us all ice cream. That was pretty cool. He went, oh gosh, where was it? Oh, it was at Slinger first year. Come around, and Randall LaJoy at the time was like helping with seats and things. He ended up being year two and year three, being the pace car driver, pace truck driver. Um, but yeah, he was coming around and he was like got ice cream for everybody. There was um, so I got a kind of funny story. It kind of goes with this and kind of not, but so everybody talks about the number one villain in SRX, which is who?
Paul Tracy.
Paul Tracy, right? Um, so first season, Paul Tracy was just, destroying stuff year and because he knows one gear, and that's full speed ahead, right? So at IRP, which would have been the fourth race in that season, um, he went in our drivers meeting. Oh, actually, he had all the crew guys come around, and he gave all the crew guys gift cards to, I think it was like Longhorn or some like steakhouse place, right? And in return, they gave him a black hat, cowboy hat, as a gift because he was wearing the black hat. It's like an old cowboy movie trope. The hero wears a white hat and the villain wears a black hat. So it comes to the driver introductions, and Paul Tracy's nowhere to be found. Trying to figure this out. There's a cop car that pulls up. He comes out in handcuffs. They act like he got arrested for breaking some stuff up, and the whole crowd went crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's that fun stuff like that, and kind of giving back to the crew guys a little bit. I mean, there were times when you had, especially Ken Schrader would come around, and even when before he was a full-time driver with SRX, he was one of the guys that shake down the cars. Him and David Stremme, and those guys would help a little bit, turn little wrenches. Stremme would turn little wrenches here and there, and help try this with the setups and things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, a lot of the drivers would take time out and meet with fans, and when we had like a fan zone kind of thing, sign some autographs. You saw at Stafford when they had the Q&A, they'll sign a couple autographs and things like that. Even doing the Q&A, I think, is a little bit outside the box, because especially Stafford, they did such a good job. Stafford and Nashville both did a really good job of that Q&A thing, asking like real questions, not the whole like, what's your favorite ice cream, and whatever. Especially with Stafford, did they have their karting kids come up with some of the questions, I think, which some of them were kind of off the wall. When's the last time you were in a fight, and like that kind of stuff. And but that kind of stuff, just the interaction, I think, is the fan interaction, is the outside the box you're talking about. And then this last year, where ESPN let the series do a little bit more on the production side, and have Tony Stewart interview people during the segment break, or they had Helio Castro Neves um, interviewing people, other drivers. That was cool, and that was, to me, a little bit outside the box, you know. Um, and that just added a little bit to it, because a driver talking to one of the ESPN crew, be it Matt Yoakum or whoever, um, might not be as animated if they're talking to a fellow racer. And I think that really added a lot to the experience, added to taking some interesting photos. I know that.
So go back to the Stafford Q&A, because I was sitting right next to you for the last 2 years of that. And I remember you mentioning, we're sitting there, you and I are just going around on the grid, taking pictures for the race. And the crowd starts doing the wave. And I asked you, I'm like, is this the energy at like every event? And you said yes, but like Stafford Outreach is that like, this is the kind of show SRX put on. Like, what kind of show do you have to do to have your short track crowd doing the wave? It was wild. You mentioned earlier about drivers doing shakedowns and stuff that fans don't necessarily see. I remember being at Stafford. I think the gates were open for this, but at Stafford this year, we believe it was like spotters that raced two of the cars, and they spun each other out in the last lap. There's some couple other things you mentioned that you showed me. There's a picture you sent me the other day about some really just cool stuff that you can only see in SRX that fans might not have seen. Can you tell me about a couple of those things?
Yeah, I mean, we had at Stafford this past year, it was either Eric Jones, I think Eric Jones spotter, and it might have been Keselowski or Harvick spotter, did kind of like a match race with two of the backup cars. And that was kind of exciting. That was, just mano a mano. So that was neat. Yeah, some of the stuff that the drivers or the fans don't get to see is the day before the race. You would have the first year you had David Stremme, and Kenny Schrader shake down all the cars to make sure that they were all equal, because that was what SRX is all about, is trying to be driver versus driver, not car versus car. Um, and sometimes you'd see some interesting, um, especially when it was Stremme versus Schrader, um, trying to, they're two different driving styles, with Stremme and Schrader, and them trying to figure out, okay, well, my car's doing this here, and that same car's doing this here. Um, and then we'd have special things like the first year at Nashville was the first like finale, and they did this special thing. CBS did this special thing with Tony Stewart and John Oates from Hall and Oates at the Grand Ole Opry, because there's a big tie between the Nashville Fairgrounds and the Gold Opry, because Marty Robbins, who was a country music star, also was a race car driver. And it just so happened that Ray Everingham restored one of his cars. And I've got a shot. I don't think I've ever published it, but I did show it to you, of Ray Everingham in a Marty Robbins 777 car, going around Nashville Speedway, or Nashville, not Speedway, Nashville Fairgrounds. Um, and it was just that cool things like that. And then another cool thing with most fans didn't get to see is we would have people bring celebrities along with them. They weren't there to be like the grand marshal. They weren't there to be anything official. But I mean, you walk around, and Marco Andretti was great about this. He would bring in people, um, from movie, TV people. I won't really mention names because I don't want to blow anybody's spot up. But you'd be like, "Is that such and such?" And of course it is. And they were really cool and laid back. Elio Castroneves actually brought one of my heroes growing up, Jill DeFerrin, who recently passed away, to South Boston a couple years ago. And it was the coolest thing to just be standing there talking to Jill DeFerrin, and actually was talking to him about the Little 500 that happens at Anderson Speedway. And he had never heard of it before. So I'm standing there, I'm talking to Jill DeFerrin and explaining the Little 500 to Jill DeFerrin. And it's one of those SRX moments where I had to kind of like go out of body and be like, oh my goodness, if the 12-year-old me would know that what I'm doing right now, he would be so excited. um but yeah, we had that. We had, like I said, John Oates actually drove one of the backup cars, because he actually did some, I think, SCCA racing back in the day. um and he was really impressed with the car, and then how much horsepower it had and how fun it was. And he was super nice too. um Yeah, but just like, and we had, that same thing at the fairgrounds in Nashville. Eddie George, the football player, Hall of Famer, was there, and I grew up a big Ohio State Buckeye fan, and he's one of the best Ohio State Buckeyes ever. And he was cool too. Like, he was just hanging out. Um, we had like, with Willie T. Ribbs, he's good friends with Allenster Jr. Allenster Jr. came to some of the races. He was cool. He was just kind of laid back, and I don't know. You just never knew. It was kind of like an inside joke. It's like, who's Marco going to bring to the race this week? Um, he just, and the people were just laid back and cool, and they weren't there they were there to have a good time. Theo Vaughn, the comedian, was at one of the races.
I
Um,
love Theo Von, man.
yeah, I
So
talked.
good.
The thing is as funny as I talked to him, didn't realize who he was until afterwards. And because I was like, that guy looked familiar. And turns out, yeah, it was Theo Vaughn. He was super cool and funny because he is a comedian. Um, but I forget what race he went to, but that was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just a really laid back but intense atmosphere. So as soon as those guys strapped on those helmets, it was game time. But when they didn't have the helmets on, especially when they didn't have the fire suits on, it was just people just having fun. I always just say that it's almost like you're with your buddies at the go-kart track, but your buddies are, Indy 500 champions, Daytona 500 champions, and the go-karts are race cars, like real race cars.
No, that's awesome. And so, out of all those names you mentioned, my favorite, John Oates. I've seen him and Daryl Hall in concert. Didn't you tell me he posed for a picture for you once, like being totally goofy about it?
Oh yeah, a lot. There's a couple shots, um, like because to be honest with you, before SRX, I hated doing candid shots. I hated it, hated it, hated it. I did not like, taking photos of people. Um, so I really broke out of my box during this because that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to do it, and I think I've gotten pretty decent at it. And I was just taking some low angle um, candids when he was walking to the car to lay down some practice laps, and he just kind of gave me a goofy look. Alan Bestwood's got the best one of the goofy looks though. I got a shot of him during a driver's meeting, and I'm just taking photos, and I'm just looking over, and he's just got this like middle school goofy face on it, and it. I just had to take a snap of that. Um, but yeah, I mean that's the whole atmosphere is just like, hey, we're just out here, we're having fun, we're taking it serious, but I mean, just having fun with it.
No, absolutely. And that passion and that your growth in candids really shows. Like you have gotten so good at that. I remember you telling me the story. Oh, excuse me. Jeez, I'm gonna have to edit that part out. I remember you telling me a story about how you were kind of posed. I think you said this in the first podcast episode with you, but how you like kind of posed Alan Bestwick because he had like the checkered flag in his eyes. Do you have any other of those like moments where you almost catch drivers in a vulnerable state, or like, more like goofy, like the
Oh
John
yeah,
Oates time?
oh yeah. A lot of them I won't post because they're kind of embarrassing. And there's some embarrassing photos of me doing my thing, as I showed you earlier, or you tried to to make the thumbnail for this.
Yeah,
Um,
we had a first rendition of this thumbnail that did not pass the vibe check, but that's okay.
but no, it's all good. And even the one that is kind of a serious goofy photo. Because it's definitely not my vibe.
It's
But
like
I thought,
early 2000s soft rock album cover material.
oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, I dig it. But at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, that's not me. Um, but no, I mean that's the thing is that's the cool thing about being able to kind of just blend into the background is you catch people at moments where they're not posing. Because to me, I mean everyone has their style, but to me, a good candid is something where they're not posing. It's not somebody posing for something. It's literally a candid. It's something where they're going about their day. They're either talking to somebody else, or I've got this really cool shot of um, a bunch of drivers hanging around, and I think they're just goofing about who's going to kick each other's butt. And Tony Kanaan just rolls up his sleeve and shows his massive biceps, and it's just the funniest thing because it just like it shows personality, and it's literally a candid moment. Like it's not like they're hamming it up for the camera or whatever. I mean, there are those. I've got some cool shots where they are hamming it up for the camera, and those are really good too. Um, Actually, one story. So when we were at CBS, the second year for Stafford, so literally the day before I met you, they did a CBS did a live, what are they called? Is it a CBS morning show? I think is the CBS's show in the AM during the week.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Well, they had Haley Deegan on the show, and they did a live, whatever, stand up with her. And that was cool to see behind the scenes how that's done. And they have the best lighting and everything just perfect. She has the cars on the track, and I'm like, when they're kind of messing around, I go, Haley, can you pose for me real quick? And I got like, like the old school early 90s NASCAR hero card kind of um pose. And that was cool. But yeah, mostly with the candids, I just like it when, you almost feel like, as the viewer of the photo, that you were there. You're a part of the conversation. You're part of the natural surrounding at the racetrack, other than being like it's, glamour shots or, school photos. There are times for those things, but that's just not my style.
No, I totally get you. So, a little term I've seen you throw around this conversation a couple times is SRX moments. Is that just something you made up, or is that like a thing within the paddock?
I think I made it up. I mean, if I didn't make it up, if I heard someone else uh and just co-opted it, I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, the SRX moment is something unexpected, and is another way of saying surreal. So XRX moment could be standing and talking to Jill DeFerrin about the little 500. Could be being a part of a conversation between two people from totally different backgrounds that you would never even imagine would be in the same room, let alone at racing against each other. SRX moments are being witness to, and this has happened constantly. It felt like, when it was all hands on deck. So there was an incident where there was a big crash. Okay, everybody was fine, but it was very close to race day when this happened, and we had to, or the crew had to take one car, take everything good off of it, and put it on another car so it could be race ready, including pulling the um the wrap off. And everyone, when I say everyone, I mean every single person that was part of SRX jumped in and did something, to the point where I felt kind of bad because I was standing there taking pictures of it. That was an SRX moment. That was a moment where I'm like, holy crap, like this is how it's supposed to be done. This is teamwork. When you've got people who have never touched the cars before, helping pull wraps off, helping run parts from here to there, and getting a car that, neither car was really race ready, but by the end of the night, they had one car that was really good, and if I think right, I think that car ended up on the podium, or it ended up like maybe top five, something like that. I know that, excuse me, I know that the car that um Jonathan Davenport won, what ends up being like last year's finale race, was trashed by Chase Briscoe the race before. So they took a car that was just totally demolished, to the point where Chase Briscoe stopped running. I think he might have went back for a couple more laps or something like that. They took that car, took it apart, put it back together, and it ended up being the race winning car the next weekend. Like, that's just nuts. That's an SRX moment to me, because it's not just like, okay, well, here's the car last week that didn't have a blemish on it, and okay, it's going to be the number one car this week. It's going to be the car that's going to probably, blow the doors off everybody. I mean, that shows so much talent on the crews putting it back together, and Jonathan Davenport, who is one of the greatest late model drivers of all time, and a super nice guy too. Um, his talent too, you know. Um, but yeah, those are the moments. Those are the moments I cherish most. Is the behind the scenes stuff. Um, those like I said, the SRX moments. Like I said, the biggest SRX moment we already talked about was that whole going to the museum and just being a part of that, and just, that's the thing, is at the end of the day, I'm just glad that I was a part of something that was this big. Some people might and that might be their cup of tea. But at the end of the day, man, this is like the highlight of my life was being part of this series and being able to be around so many great people. And I don't mean great people as in great drivers, but great people. We had some great individuals, some really, salt of the earth people in and around that series. And that's what I'm going to miss most, pretty much.
I can't even imagine because I mean the two SRX events I covered, just the surrealness of being there in practice. So, in the middle of the afternoon, there's 30 people in the infield. I'm one of them. A dozen of them are drivers. There's probably other couple other photographers, and just being a part of that, just for one day, and it was your home for 6 weeks. So I mean, you spent 18 weeks. 18 weeks with this group of people, and that's something pretty special. And I remember you texted me when it happened. I mean, like you said, you were pretty heartbroken because it was a highlight of your life. And I'm glad I got to share that with you for a couple days with it. And you posted for a couple days in a row your favorite pictures from each season, your favorite memories. Are there any pictures that stick out to you that have a cool story behind them that you'd like to talk about?
Mm, man, there's so many. Um, well, like I touched on before, some of those shots of the drivers, like I have one shot with, um, what would it be? Four, five, six, seven, seven Indy 500 championships in one photo. I mean, four of them are Elio Castroneves, but still, Elio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, and Alan Sir Jr. just talking, and that's kind of like a cool thing. Oh, another cool thing was same event. Um, so we were at IRP, and uh, they had the Burt Warner Trophy at IRP, and because this is the same year that Elio won his fourth Indy 500, so they have a big thing with Elio and the trophy or whatever. But they shot, if you go back on YouTube or CBS has it on any streaming service, they shot like a promo of a Elio in the back seat with the trophy and Tony Kanaan driving I think it was like a 65 Mustang um, convertible around IRP. And that was one of those things where I was talking to somebody and I'm like, oh, that's a cool car. Realizing what they were doing, ran over so I could get a shot. I got one lap to get the shot, and it's a pretty decent shot. It's Elio like polishing the trophy in the back seat, and that was kind of cool. That was kind of a cool shot, kind of a cool memory. Um, I actually, you know what? And some of the coolest photos, or the photos that meant the most to me, um, were family oriented. So um, I lost my father when I was 16, and he's the one who really installed the love for racing with me. Um, and he's pretty much the reason why I do all the stuff I do on the racing side with photography and stuff because I can't drive. I don't have the money to own a team, but I can, I'm okay at pointing a camera at a race car and pushing a button. And
You are more than okay, my friend.
okay,
You're more than okay
okay.
at it.
I'm very okay.
Ah,
Um,
you're great.
so seeing the father and son bonds that we had. Um, so with Bill Elliott and Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney and Dave Blaney, um, even Ernie Francis Jr. and Sr. Even though Ernie Sr. didn't really race, but he was there every time that Ernie Francis Jr. raced with us. Sr. was there. So seeing that, and then every one race out of all 3 years, my wife got to come and join me. And actually, she got one of her photos published from the first Eldora race, and she was able to, be right there by my side, taking direction, which is kind of cool. of, hey, I need you to go do this, I need you to go do that, and she did it begrudgingly, but she did it, and that was really neat. And then last season and the second season, my mom got to go, and she got to meet all these drivers and introduce herself as, oh, I'm Wayne's mom, and she felt really like kind of she had a place in the, whatever you want to call it, like she's proud, put it that way. And then the biggest one is, so since my father passed away, my grandfather, my mother's father, um, really kind of stepped up and took over, that, along with a couple other people, took over that father role. And he's getting up there in age, but we used to, when I was younger, college age, we used to go to the races together, and we went to like the first truck race at Eldora together, and we went, and it was mostly dirt stuff because that's my background. We go to Attica, we go to Eldora, we go to a lot of places like that, sprint cars mainly. Um, but he finally agreed to go to one of the SRX races, and he did that last year at Eldora. And he wanted to meet Haley Deegan. That was his whole goal. He talked for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks about seeing Haley Deegan and meeting Haley Deegan, because my grandfather is really big on women in sports, especially racing. He's a very big proponent of women in sports and racing. And so I got to introduce him to Haley Deegan and introduce him to Bobby Labonte and Alan Bestwick and Tony Kanaan and all these people. And he got his picture taken with Haley, and you would think that I just gave him $1 million. Like, it was the coolest thing. And I'm just sitting back and I'm just thinking, as I'm taking the photos, I'm just thinking, wow, like, how far have we come, um, from him and I sitting up in the grandstands at a World of Outlaw race to, him being able to enjoy the fruits of my labor of tolling around at the, you know grassroots level, and kind of getting a decent break, and being able to share the experience with him, and, like I said, with uh, my wife and my mother. And it was just one of the best things. And I'm just glad that in that 3 years I got to share that with my family, to that point. And that's something that, that I just hold really high. And I'm proud I could give him that experience of meeting some of these people. It's pretty cool. And he talks about it nonstop now. Nonstop.
Nah, man, I know you've definitely made your dad proud. You made your wife proud. You made the rest of your family proud. What's the most proud moment for you personally that you've made with SRX? Like, I mean, there's like little things like for me, like I see my work on like a billboard or something. That's like super cool. Like what's the most like, you know, thing that stuck out to you? Like, damn, we're really doing this. I'm super proud of that. Or if you have one.
Um, I think just the fact that they had me back for the second and third season. Um, it just showed that season one wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a, for lack of a better term, like a nepotism hire, that I wasn't just the guy that um, sent the right email at the right time. And, it's one of those things, connections can only get you so far. They can get your foot in the door. It's your job to walk through the door and make sure that you stay on the other side. And I think that's the thing I was most proud of, was the fact that, you know, there was a chance that they could have gone in another direction after year one. And there was a chance they could have gone in another direction after year two. But they decided not to. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, is to date being the guy and the only guy. The only SRX official photographer is me, and I'm proud of that fact. And to be honest with you, even saying that is still crazy to me. Is that, they did want me back. It's like imposter. What do you call it? What did you call that before? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Is like I was always raised that there's always somebody that's better than you at whatever you do, but you're also show that you're better than most. You know, don't act like act like you've been there before. Act like you've earned it, because nothing is guaranteed, and nothing is anything that's promised isn't real until it's delivered. So my wife got on me so bad in the between the seasons, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if they're gonna welcome me back. I don't know if I'm gonna be back. I'm gonna put it in my calendar and do all this." And she's like, "Shut up. They're gonna have you back." And I'm like, "I don't know that until I sign that contract and that ink is dry for that season." Um, because I don't take anything for granted. Like I worked really hard to get where I'm at, and I know it could all disappear in the blink of an eye. So I work really hard to try to get better and better and better at what I'm doing, try to learn, try to make those connections, keep those connections um, solid, make sure that if something does happen that I don't burn bridges, because you just never know. Um, and I mean, as you know, for being a creative person in the industry, um, I act like I'm getting paid $1 million every assignment I have. I don't care if I'm getting paid decently, which I have been in the past, or I'm doing it for free. My effort's the same. I show that effort the same, um, and that just kind of gets you to the point where you get a reputation of being reliable, being thorough, being taking good notes, taking criticism well, constructive criticism well. Um, but yeah, that's the thing I'm most proud of is that they welcome me back.
And you mentioned your wife in there. I'm a newlywed, as you know, and in having that support from your spouse is one of the most important things, especially when you're gone for 6 weeks straight. I think you were able to check back one for like one day this past summer. But I mean, how hard is that being gone for pretty much 6 weeks straight? Like, how did you handle that?
I think she welcomed it actually, to be honest with you. No, it's difficult. You have to have a lot of trust. Um, Communication's key. Um, this past season, I really didn't have too much time to be homesick, because if I wasn't at the track for the SRX, I was at the track covering NASCAR stuff for Podium Finish in that 6 weeks. Um, so that kind of helps. Um, but but yeah, it is difficult. And then that's the thing is I really give it up to the full-time NASCAR folks and IndyCar folks and the NHRA that are on the road for a majority of the year and hardly ever get to go back. People like Justin Potter and even like Jamie Price, who goes all over the world doing what they're doing, because I kind of got that taste of it and was able to, do other things as well, have a day job that I really enjoy, and live a kind of normal life, as normal as you can get. But those men and women who are out there on the road from, you know, February to November every year, and some that are on the road even more than that, because a lot of your full time NASCAR, like Noah, he's shoot seems like he's everywhere during the off season, he's everywhere. He did what the Chili Bowl this year. He did a lot of stuff for Flow down in Florida. That's just a grind.
Noah's an absolute beast, man. And
Yeah, and
he is like the most kind, humble, down to earth kid. Like I love Noah, dude. He's awesome.
yeah, he's that nice combo of talent and um like a great talent and a great person. Like full stop. Like every I mean, there's a lot of great people in this industry, and there's a lot of people that all you have to do is ask questions and they're more than happy to help. I know at Detroit Grand Prix this year, very first time it was downtown since like the 90s. Totally different circuit. No one really knew anything. Everyone did a track walk on that Thursday, which I wasn't there for. But that photo room, it was like, hey, I found this cool place over here. Oh, how do we get to it? And it's like, it didn't matter if who you were with. I mean, you could be, editorial person, you could be with a team. It was just a very collaborative effort. And that was really cool. And that's what I really love about doing the bigger series like that. At the SRX stuff, it's like I really pull um, on information from the locals, unless it's like Stafford, which I feel like I should have had a condo up there. We went there so many times, um, but yeah, that's the thing that's cool about this is having the um, the camaraderie between different creatives and photographers and videographers, and that's the cool thing about it, and just having that nice community.
No, absolutely. Especially when you come into, at least in my experience, a lot of short tracks, there's a lot of bad blood, I guess, between the regular photographers. I don't know if that's the same way out in the Midwest, but I know some places in the Northeast it is. Not Stafford, but other places I'm not going to name. And then when SRX comes into town, it's almost kind of like an even, like, hey, we can all be friends here. There's like an attitude change almost. How much, like, when you came to a track that you've never been to, because I know there's quite a few tracks you checked off on the track chasing list. How much did you rely on the locals to kind of help you get by and help you like obviously you know just from your experience you know what you're doing to show up, but how much of a help were those guys and how much did you rely on those guys to kind of figure out a new venue to photograph?
A lot, really. I tried to seek out whoever the track photographer was, or locals, or even it was like going up to someone like you and being like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like when you were shooting through the Arco barriers, like, what is that? What are you doing? And I always felt too, like when I went into a track, like I am the guest. I am not the person. Don't have an ego or anything like that. And I was there as their guest. This is their house. So I'm not going to step on toes. At the same time is I felt like I was the host of the series. So if I saw a photographer I'd never talked to before, I'd be like, "Hey, what's your name? What's up?" Kind of feeling them out a little bit too. Getting information from them, like you said, "Oh yeah, this is a cool spot." Um, "Oh, don't go over there," what that kind of stuff. And they kind of get feedback too of like, "Okay, well, how does this go down? How you guys run your show?" Um, so it was kind of an exchange of ideas and things like that. Um, I'm just glad when I started and where I started here in Ohio, at the dirt tracks, it was really welcoming for the most part. Now, it was welcoming if you followed direction and understood um, that there is a track photographer. This is his or her territory. Don't try to step on their toes. Don't try to sell stuff at the track. Um, you know, underneath their nose. Um, Try to be a good visitor, and just you know do your thing without interfering with everybody else. But yeah, I definitely relied a lot on the locals. Um, and I mean, that's just how you do it. Like, who knows better than the person that shoots there 12 times a year.
No, absolutely. So I hate asking superlative questions, but I feel like there's a couple good ones to ask here. What was the most challenging track to photograph when you just showed up and you're like, okay, now what?
That one's easy. I-55, um, super cool track, like super cool, except for it has a massive fence in the infield. So shooting in the infield was difficult. And I'm not afraid of heights, but being on a really big A-frame ladder, I actually got vertigo. Um, but I still got some decent shots. I'll be honest, but that was definitely tricky. And the even though it's in my backyard and I've shot it a million times, Eldora was very difficult the first time around because we had such a big presence on the TV side that most of the photo holes and platforms were taken up by TV. So that was kind of interesting. But luckily, like I said, I've shot a lot there, so I knew where some places that were a little off the beaten path, different angles to catch and whatnot. It was a little bit easier this second time around this past year. Um, but yeah, I mean that's the fun thing too is going into a new place and not knowing exactly how to figure things out. And for me, it was shakedown when they're doing single cars, not going full bore, and I could just be like, okay, well, the sun's going to be over here during practice in the race. What's the angle going to look like? And it's if it's a usable shot, it's a usable shot. If not, it's not like it's anything crazy. It was a practice for me as well as a practice for or shakedown for the cars themselves. So I dig that challenge. I dig going to a new place and being trying to think outside the box, but also trying to be careful and not go too far outside the box.
So on the opposite end of the spectrum, yeah, I've heard I-55 stuff. Isn't the lighting there like pretty brutal as well on top of it? Or
It's
like,
it's okay. It's okay.
I know Stafford's lighting is not ideal. Um, as I experienced that. What was the track that you showed up to the first time that was just like, oh, this is awesome? Because I've had a couple of tracks I've showed up to. I'm just like, oh wow, this is gonna be a fun time for me. Like Oswego Speedway shooting Super Dirt Week. That was fun. That was cool. And I meet him just like, oh wow, okay, this is cool. Were there any tracks like that where it's like, oh, this is gonna be a good time?
Yeah. The first time around, uh, South Boston. South Boston was cool. I always describe South Boston as a video game track because it's perfect. Like it's exactly what you want it to be. And people there were super awesome too. They invited me to come in and I shot a smart modified race there before the SRX stuff. So I guess I wasn't the first time, but still. But the second trip to Nashville was probably one of the most fun I had shooting wise because Nashville Fairgrounds is pretty big for a short track and there's a lot of places to go. And the first year I found out like, okay, if I do this, and then I used that information the second time we went there, and it was just like so much easier, so much more creative, and it just kind of just was a more enjoyable thing with a little bit of information. So that's why I would say is a tie between South Boston and Nashville.
So you mentioned Eldora. That's a track you know well. Um, I've heard it's a pain in the butt to shoot, even when all this stuff's not taken up by TV cameras. And I remember you mentioned to me something with Elio Castroneves at Eldora. And I hear
Yeah,
that's a story.
yeah. So Elio had never been to Eldora before. There's actually a lot of people who've never been to Eldora before that first season. And Elio, especially the first year, Elio had a fun little back and forth because he's just a great dude. and he was asking about the history of the track and all that, and I was giving as much as I knew. Um, and I go, "Hey, Elio, how'd you get here? Did you drive down the track or did you go through the love tunnel?" And Elio just looks at me and goes, "There's a love tunnel?" Like, "Yeah, it's a love tunnel. Come on." So him and his friend from Brazil he used to kart with uh, was filming him for like a little online Instagram kind of thing. And so we went down and for those that don't have never been to Eldora, there's a tunnel that runs underneath the track so you can get from the outside of the track to the inside of the track without actually crossing the actual track. And it's called the Eddie Gossage Love Tunnel. So we're talking and he's talking about I don't know, it's in Portuguese, so I don't speak Portuguese. I hardly speak English. So we're just talking and I'm showing him and it was kind of one of those SRX moments because in the video he says my friend Wayne, and I'm like, oh, he called me his friend, and we go in. I show him the love tunnel. We go down the love tunnel. We pop out the other side, and who's on the other side of the love tunnel is Marco Andretti, James Hinchcliffe, and PJ Chesham, who used to be a sprint car driver, drove a little bit of IndyCar as well. Um, and he literally goes, "Guys, do you know that there's a love tunnel?" And it was just kind of one of those funny little things. Um, and kind of a side note with that, and my wife's going to kill me for telling the story, but she had been there the day before during shakedown and everything, and she's like, I'm not going to come out again for another day at the track. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. We live about an hour away from Eldora. And I called her on the phone. I was like, yeah, we're having a good time out here. Just hanging out with Elio and James Hinchcliffe and Marco. And she goes, James Hinchcliffe's there? I go, yeah, James Hinchcliffe's right here. He's about like 3 feet away from me. She goes, I'll be there in an hour. So she got there because she was, at the time, especially, she was a big James Hinchcliffe fan. Um, she's a huge Simon Pagenaud fan. But no, that was cool. Got to introduce him to the Love Tunnel. But yeah, Elio is pretty. He is exactly who he is on TV. That's his personality. Like he is just go 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 go. Makes time out for fans, makes time out for kids, makes time out for goofy photographers like myself. Um, but yeah, that was the Love Tunnel thing is definitely to the point where uh, it's just kind of ingrained in my brain. Um, every time I go to Eldora and I see the Love Tunnel, I think of Elio. Because before, when I was growing up, Eldora, yeah, it's a pretty steep bank and it's dirt, so when it gets wet, it gets pretty slick. Before the Love Tunnel, you actually had to cross the dirt surface, and if it started raining and you're in the infield, there's pictures online, but people would have to do hand in hand and make human chains to get out of the infield. Yeah. So we think we're very thankful for the Love Tunnel here in West Central Ohio.
Speaking of rain, remember when we got absolutely dumped on the second the checkered flag flew at Stafford?
Oh yeah, I
That
remember
was the
that.
worst. That was the
Uh,
absolute worst.
and I'm always the positive guy. You know that. So Denny Hamlin gets a bad rap. That guy was a trooper because he still did victory lane. It was raining and it still did victory lane, and he didn't have to. He could have just said screw it, just take a picture of me with the checkered flag underneath one of the awnings. But he still did victory lane. Yeah, I literally got underneath the Skip Barber little I called it the chill zone, where we had the chairs and stuff for when we had our meals. And the back of my one shoe got soaked, but I got underneath it before any of my camera equipment got soaked. So, and it wasn't even supposed to rain that day. That's the funny thing. It was like maybe a 15% chance of rain. But
Yeah,
oh
I
man,
remember that. And I just remember seeing lightning on the horizon. And it's like the second the flag dropped, it just started pouring. I
yeah,
remember I'm like, I see you in Loudon in 2 days. And I bolted to my car, and oh man, that drive home sucked.
But yeah,
What?
the next day or the next race, I went up to Don Hawk, the CEO, and I go, Don, I said, Hawk, I know the series is called Thursday Night Thunder now, but that was just a little bit too much.
Yeah, that
Like
wasn't
you ordered
nice.
that thunder and lightning right in the middle of the race. Come on, man. I know you're a showman, but come on. He thought it was funny.
Yeah. The last race season was brutal on the weather. I remember I got up to Loudon and I stayed in my hotel and didn't even go up for Friday because it was supposed to rain and then it didn't. And you were up there taking pictures, of Xfinity
Hmm.
practice. Like, look what you're missing. I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Thanks, buddy."
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that was brutal. So do you know or what? Wow, what's the word I'm looking for? Original. Wow, I had a brain fart. Where did the
Original.
term love tunnel come from? That's what I'm trying to
I have
ask.
no idea. I have no idea where the term love tunnel came from. Maybe the love of the fans, so that way they didn't have to cross the track.
Yeah.
It's been around for, I think, since the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe.
Huh. Because I've
I could
never
be
heard of
wrong.
that
I
one.
could be totally wrong. All I remember is I started shooting there in '06, and it was there in '06. So,
Because I've never
but
heard of that. Obviously, I've heard
yeah,
of Eddie
it's a love tunnel.
Gossage.
Yeah.
Because he's larger than life. Huh. I want to look into that now. I think that's my assignment for after this because I got to
Yep.
pack up some gamer gear.
And also look at for Eldora, look at the Eldora ballroom because the ballroom predates the racetrack. Because Earl Baltus used to, the guy who founded Eldora, used to play in a big band, like a '40s era big band, and he built this ballroom in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, for his band to play dances and stuff, and then decided to build a racetrack. Started out, I think, as like a 5/8, maybe a third of a mile, and then developed into a half mile. And there's actually huge lore in the dirt racing world. There was going to be a dirt mile in the back, behind like this river or creek or whatever, that never got built. But there's all these stories about, oh yeah, one time, Jack Hodden or no, Jack Hewitt drove a sprint car and hit 200 miles an hour in it, and they had to shut it down. It's like, no, it never even got built. Like
That's
they
awesome.
kind of like plowed the land for it, and that's about it. But there's a house on it now, so it's never going to see the light of day. But
That's
yeah, Eldor
tough.
is a really interesting place when you get into the history of it and all, like the ABC Wild World of Sports stuff. And they he there's one race there, the million, the first million, late model million, when Earl started the Kings Royal. They were paying $50,000 to win when all the other races were paying like five for a big purse. To the point where someone called Earl up and said, "Hey, you might want to call Speed Sport Magazine because they misprinted your race there. They said they're going to be paying 50,000. There's no way." And they used to give out the money in like money, like cash, and it would
That's
be
wild.
like in a bread box or like in a shopping cart or a shopping bag or something like that. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So you're the only SRX official photographer in history
To date, I'm
to date.
not gonna
To date.
to date. I mean,
See, Ray Abraham went on Dale Jr. Download this week that gave a bleak outlook for the future of SRX, from my understanding. I haven't listened to it. Obviously, you do a lot of other shooting. You have this huge set on your resume now, along with the other things you that are huge on your resume. What's next? What do you got on the card for this season?
this season I'm going to continue working with the Podium Finish, covering NASCAR stuff, IndyCar stuff, hopefully some NHRA, hopefully some Moto America.
Heyo.
Yeah. Doing ins and outs. I love variety, so throw a lot of variety in there. Still one of the track photographers for Indianapolis Raceway Park. So we got a couple big races there this year. We've got the Carb Classic with USAC sprint car or Silver Crown cars. We got midgets, and then the USF 2000 series running there, and then
Forgot
in
they race in
July.
the oval. That's such
Oh
a
yeah,
random thing.
well, and
It's
it's so
cool though.
cool. It's so cool because, oh shoot, I think it was the first year I shot it. There was only in the two fields of the Formula cars, there was only like three drivers who have ever been on an oval before. And IRP is definitely a challenging oval, wide and kind of flat.
It's
And
very counterintuitive if you've never driven an oval.
yes, it's cool though. Great history at that track. We also have the trucks and NASCAR trucks in ARCA are going to be there in July to accompany the Cup weekend back on the big oval at Michigan and in or Michigan in Indianapolis. The future's open. I'm open to other opportunities. Doing really well on my day job. I really like my day job. Progressing a little bit more in that,
Do you
which
want to just
gives.
explain what your day job is really like super quick?
Um,
Because your day job is badass.
Yeah, I can be sort of vague with it. Um, I work for a company called the Transportation Research Center, and I am a test driver with the research center. So I drive prototype and pre-production vehicles from different manufacturers. And at the end of the day, my job is to break cars, but in a very specific way. I'm also a driving instructor out there. Um, And so, I mean, it's a really great place. It's a 7.5 mile oval that's banked, I think, 36 degrees, and a bunch of different facilities inside it, including like a wind tunnel and a gravel road and different profile roads, a vehicle dynamic um, area with autocross courses, and we've got two different kinds of road courses: a winding road course and a dynamic road course. But it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the United States. And actually, I think I shared this with you back in 1987. Uh, Track and Road and Track did a um, cover story about a Cup car, which was Tim Richmond's Cup car in 1986, and the Porsche GTP car from 1986 went head to head on our 7.5 mile track to see who went the fastest. And the top speed was 240 miles an hour by the Cup car. I mean, it was definitely would not pass any um, NASCAR tech at the time, and not now either. Um, but yeah, Tim Richmond went 240 miles an hour in a 1986 Cup car at where I work. Um,
That's insane.
yeah, yeah. So it's a cool place. They're really flexible with letting me go out and do the photography stuff. Very supportive of that, and I work with a lot of really good people. And I said it's a every day's a little bit different. Some days I'm hitting bumps all day, and some days I'm going 125, 130, 125 miles an hour on the oval. Those days are not like right now during the wintertime, but during the summer, every once in a while.
Now that's awesome. And hopefully I still plan on it if I can make it work just on my schedule and financially to hopefully shoot my first Moto America race and my first time in Mid Ohio with you. That'll be awesome. Where can people follow along your journeys? Instagram, social media, any of that? Where can people follow along, see your work, see where you're at, and keep up with you?
Yeah, on Instagram and Twitter X, whatever you want to call it now. It's the same. It's Riegle Photos, Riegle Photos for all that. And I usually post at least every week or so. I don't try to really spam people with stuff. Just try to, post as needed, or if I find something interesting from the past. But yeah, just like sharing it with everybody. And if you want to follow, go for it. If you don't, it's all good.
And all that information will be in the description wherever you're listening to this. Wayne, man, It's great to talk to you again. Not that we're always texting each other throughout the week, but it's the first time we've actually talked face to face since we saw each other at Pocono. Buddy, it's great to talk to you again. I can't wait to see you hopefully at Mid Ohio.
Yep. See ya.
Wayne Riegle on the Draiss Media Podcast.